Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking, so charged with raw tension, that it made your heart pound and your mind race to make sense of it all? Picture this: a bustling airport gate at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta. International passengers shuffling forward in an impatient line when a pilot abruptly stops a black man, refusing to even acknowledge his valid ticket. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Phones start recording. A silent, disbelieving hush blankets the scene. Just when all hope seems lost, an armed Air Marshal steps forward and does the unimaginable. He salutes the very man the pilot tried to humiliate. What happens next will leave you speechless. A bright Monday morning dawned over Atlanta, the sprawling cityscape reflecting shimmering light from glass high-rises and highways thick with traffic. Hartsfield-Jackson. Atlanta International Airport, known to be the busiest in the world, was already abuzz with thousands of travelers rolling suitcases across its polished floors. Families, business people, vacationers, all converged under the massive curving terminals that had become a symbol of modern travel and commerce. Inside Terminal S flight monitors displayed Delta Flight 4823, bound for John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Lines in the food court spilled onto the corridor, and overhead announcements periodically reminded people to mind their bags. Amid the commotion, a tall man wearing a navy blue suit and polished black shoes stepped up to Gate 36B. His name was Malik Johnson, a 39-year-old with broad shoulders and a calm composure. A dedicated father of two, an Army veteran, and a proud graduate of Morehouse College. Malik had seen the world in ways many could only imagine. He was used to scanning crowds for trouble out of habit, a skill honed from serving overseas in active conflict zones. As he approached the gate, the usual shuffle and wait routine began. Passengers clutched their boarding passes or fumbled for their phones to pull up digital tickets. Some were wrangling restless kids, others impatiently tapping their feet. Malik stood quietly checking emails on his phone. An older woman, presumably in her 70s, struggled with a carry-on bag. Without hesitation, Malik helped lift her bag onto the belt for tagging, earning a grateful smile. It was a small act of kindness, the sort of thing that came naturally to him. Unbeknownst to him, a stark confrontation lay just minutes away. A confrontation that would not only challenge one man's prejudice, but would reverberate through the entire flight, culminating in an unexpected salute from someone carrying far more authority than anyone had guessed. From the gate's glass windows, Malik could see the sleek silver and blue Boeing 737 that would soon carry everyone north to New York. Nearby ground crew vehicles hummed around the aircraft, loading luggage and fueling up. Across the waiting area, a tall, clean-shaven pilot in full uniform, badge on his chest, stripes on his shoulders, entered the gate area. A quick glance at his ID card revealed his name, Captain Richard Holloway. Holloway had that purposeful stride that seasoned captains often have, but there was something else about him. Perhaps the faint scowl on his lips, or the tightness around his eyes that hinted he might be under stress or simply in a perpetually foul mood. Passengers rarely paid close attention to the flight crew, beyond a quick glance to confirm they were in safe hands. But Malik, having been in disciplined environments before, instinctively took note of posture, facial expressions, and subtle cues. He could sense that Holloway exuded a certain tension, as though on edge about something. The gate agents busy scanning boarding passes for first class and priority boarding hardly seemed to register the pilot's arrival. One agent, a petite woman named Tanya, had a sincere smile and an efficient manner, calling out boarding zones over the intercom. The line shuffled forward in increments. Malik was in Zone 2. As the Zone 1 passengers, a hodgepodge of business suits and a few parents with small children filed through, Captain Holloway made a beeline to the front. Usually, no one bats an eye when a pilot does this, as they're often heading into the cockpit or performing last-minute checks. But Holloway didn't look content with simply passing through. Instead, he lingered near Dr. Tanya, occasionally glancing back at the queue. Within a few moments, Holloway's eyes settled on Malik. It was one of those lingering stares that lasted a beat too long, the kind that made you wonder if you had something stuck to your face. Malik, not wanting to jump to conclusions, assumed the pilot was just scanning the crowd as well, perhaps by habit. He looked away, returning to his phone. When Holloway leaned toward Tanya and whispered something, the agent's smile vanished. Tanya's gaze flickered to Malik, then back to the pilot. She nodded tensely. Right then, Malik felt that familiar prickle on the back of his neck. Something was off. It was the same kind of alertness he'd felt on patrol during deployment, that sixth sense telling him a confrontation was on the horizon. Zone 2 was called. Malik stepped forward with the rest of the passengers. His phone boarding pass displayed the correct seat, 12A, a window seat in main cabin. He had chosen it for the view, hoping to see the sunrise cast long shadows over the east coast. The line inched ahead, and soon he was face to face with Tanya, who mustered a polite smile, despite the tension in her eyes. "Good morning," Malik offered, handing over his phone to be scanned. "Morning." Tanya replied, scanning the QR code. The device beeped, turning green, a universal sign that the boarding pass was valid. Before Tanya could hand the phone back, Captain Holloway stepped forward and blocked the doorway leading to the jet bridge. He pivoted to Tanya, ignoring Malik entirely. "Tanya, hold on a second," he said pointedly. "Everything's fine, Captain," Tanya said, her voice tremoring slightly. "He's cleared to board." Holloway didn't even glance at Malik. "I need to see that ticket again." Malik could feel the stares from the passengers behind him. A few cell phones were already out, capturing the awkward exchange. He kept his composure, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. Why was the pilot so intent on verifying a ticket that had just scanned valid calmly? Malik turned his phone around so Holloway could see the digital boarding pass. "Here you go, sir," he said politely. Holloway stared at it for a few seconds, lips pressed into a thin line. Instead of acknowledging it as valid, he muttered, "I don't see your name on the passenger manifest." "I have." Tanya's face paled. She stammered, "But, Captain, I just scanned him in." "The system." "It's fine," Malik interjected gently, keeping his voice level. "Is there a problem with my seat?" "Captain." For a moment, Holloway's gaze flickered across Malik's face as though searching for some flaw, some reason to reject him. Finally, he said in a clipped tone, "We're overbooked, sir. I'll need you to stand aside while we sort this out." A hush spread through the line. Overbookings happened all the time, but rarely did a pilot intervene so aggressively, especially with someone whose ticket had already been cleared. Tanya pulled up the passenger list on her computer screen. Her eyes scanned the seat assignments. She turned to the captain voice, trembling with confusion. "Captain, we're not overbooked in 12A. That seat is still open for Mr. Johnson. Everything checks out." Holloway's expression hardened further, the lines on his brow deepening. Still refusing to look directly at Malik, he said, "There must be a mistake. Step aside." By now, Malik's pulse had quickened. He wasn't a stranger to subtle and sometimes blatant acts of discrimination. He also knew that causing a scene could escalate things quickly. So he stepped aside calmly, heart pounding, but maintained his polite demeanor. As Malik stood off to the side, eyes downcast, to avoid making the moment more confrontational, memories flooded his mind. He recalled old stories his grandfather used to share about traveling during Jim Crow, about being forced to use separate facilities or being overlooked and mistreated. Malik's father had dealt with discrimination in the corporate world, both subtle and overt, and had instilled in him the importance of holding on to dignity, no matter the situation. Malik had done everything society asked of him, served his country honorably, earned a college degree with honors, built a stable family life, and yet here he was, singled out in public, made to feel less than. Other passengers had started to board around him. Most gave him apologetic glances, and he overheard whispered comments. "This is ridiculous. That pilot is out of line. I scanned my ticket just fine." A few were filming with their phones, after all, in this digital age. No moment of injustice goes unnoticed. Malik took a deep breath, reminding himself that overreaction would only reinforce stereotypes in the mind of someone like Holloway. Finally, Tanya cleared her throat. "Captain, I'm sure if we just check the system again." Holloway cut her off. "No. I need verification from a supervisor. For security reasons." "Security reasons?" The words stung, as if Malik, a law-abiding citizen and veteran, posed some threat. The pilot's obstinacy was so obvious that even Tanya looked flustered, torn between her job to cooperate with the captain and her desire to honor what was clearly correct procedure. While Holloway and Tanya spoke in hushed, tense voices, another figure emerged from the jet bridge. A man in plain clothes, perhaps in his early 40s, with a sturdy build, short brown hair, and a discreet black badge clipped inside his jacket. He was Federal Air Marshal Ethan Connors. Typically, Air Marshals travel incognito, blending in with regular passengers to watch for suspicious behavior. The fact that he was stepping out into public view meant something had piqued his attention. From years of training, Malik immediately recognized the subtle posture that gave Connors away. The agent walked with the poised alertness of someone with extensive tactical background. Connors approached the small group at the gate. His voice was calm but firm. "Is there some sort of security issue here?" Holloway tensed. For a split second, he looked like a man caught off guard. "Just a mix-up with the passenger manifest," he said curtly. Connors's eyes flicked to Malik. He noticed the tension in Malik's shoulders, the look of quiet dignity in his eyes. Then he observed Holloway's body language, defensiveness, anger, something else. "Because if there's no real security issue," Connors continued, "we should let boarding proceed smoothly." "Which is exactly what I've been trying to do," Tanya added, regaining a bit of her professional confidence now that an official presence was there. She turned her monitor around for Connors to see. "Mr. Malik Johnson, seat 12A. The system shows everything is good. The captain here says the seat is overbooked, but our manifest doesn't indicate that at all." Holloway exhaled sharply. "We have authority to deny boarding if we suspect a passenger might be a threat, or if there's a discrepancy in the passenger list." That word again, threat. Malik tightened his jaw. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan, had top security clearances, and had never once been labeled a threat by the US government. The idea that this pilot was brandishing the concept of security threat so cavalierly was both infuriating and heartbreaking. Connors lifted an eyebrow. "Well, I'll have to see your reason for suspecting that." There was a hint of challenge in his tone, as if warning the pilot to tread carefully. Holloway didn't answer directly. He merely glared at Malik. "He's not flying on this plane until I'm satisfied," he said, finally. By now the lines had boarded, except for a few latecomers and those waiting to see what would happen. People watching from the waiting area were murmuring among themselves, and the tension was palpable. Phones were aimed squarely at the confrontation. No one wanted to miss a possible viral moment. A mother with 2 teenagers looked on her face a portrait of disbelief. A middle-aged man in a business suit whispered, "This is going to blow up on social media." Another passenger, a young woman, wearing a Morehouse college hoodie, seemed especially concerned. She stepped closer and politely asked Malik if he was okay. He nodded reassuringly, not wanting to escalate the situation by roping in more voices. Tanya glanced at the clock. The flight was nearing its departure time, and a delay was almost certain if the pilot continued this standoff. Anxiety weighed on her. She had a job to do, a schedule to maintain, and a line of connecting flights that would be impacted. Still, she couldn't bring herself to forcibly remove a passenger whose credentials clearly matched the records. Air Marshal Connors studied the pilot. "Captain, may I speak with you in private?" he asked, gesturing to a corner away from prying ears and cameras. Holloway hesitated, then nodded sharply, walking over with Connors. Tanya took the opportunity to hand Malik's phone back to him, leaning in to whisper, "I'm so sorry. I have no idea what's gotten into him." "Your seat is confirmed." Malik gave her a grateful nod. "I appreciate you trying to help," he whispered back. Connors led Holloway to a space near the gate windows far from the crowd. With the hum of airport activity, as their white noise they spoke in low tones. Anyone watching from a distance would see them, but not hear the conversation. "What exactly is the problem here?" Connors pressed. Holloway folded his arms, gaze drifting as if searching for words. "The problem is we don't know who this man is. I saw something about him that doesn't match the manifest I got. Could be a glitch, could be something else." Connors' eyes narrowed. He could sense a half-truth when he heard one. "Don't know who he is?" "He scanned in, didn't he?" "Why single him out?" For a fleeting moment, Holloway's mask slipped. There was a flicker of something like contempt. "Look, these days you can't be too careful. People can falsify tickets, IDs, everything. All I want is to make sure that's the gate agent's job, not yours." Connors interrupted bluntly. "Unless you specifically have reason to believe he's a threat." "Is that the case?" Holloway hesitated. Clearly, he had no legitimate reason. It was obvious to Connors that the pilot was operating on a personal bias. After a moment, Holloway doubled down. "I'm the captain. The safety of the passengers is ultimately my responsibility. I get to call the shots." Connors let out a slow breath. "Captain, I'm well aware of your authority, but I'm also well aware of the law. If you deny boarding to a passenger without just cause, especially if that passenger has been cleared by TSA and the airline system, you could be looking at major trouble." Holloway's jaw tightened. "Then let the airline handle it. We'll see what they say." Connors gave him a measured look. "I've spent enough time around real threats to know that man is not one. If you persist, you might not only cause a scene, but also put your own career at risk." With that, Connors turned to walk back toward the gate area, leaving Holloway glaring at the carpet. While the pilot and the air marshal conferred privately, Malik found himself replaying the day's events in his mind. He recalled his father's words. "When you encounter prejudice, keep your chin up and your voice steady. Let your character speak louder than their hate." It had become a guiding mantra for him. He closed his eyes momentarily, imagining the medals and commendations locked away in his desk at home, tangible evidence of his service. He remembered the day he received a bronze star for bravery under fire pinned on him by a commanding officer who told him, "Your courage saved lives." That felt like a lifetime ago. He'd served with men and women of all races, each of them trusting one another with their lives. Out there in the desert, what mattered was whether you had someone's back, not the color of your skin. Yet here, in a place that was supposed to represent a world brought closer by flight, old prejudices still lingered. He wondered what kind of example this moment set for the younger generation watching, or for that elderly woman he had helped with her bag. Prejudice did not simply vanish over time. It needed to be confronted in moments like this. Passengers nearby tried to offer words of support. A small circle had gathered around, giving Malik emotional reinforcement. He recognized a couple of them from the original line. Two women in their 20s, a middle-aged father traveling with his teenage son, and the Morehouse alum, who wore a sweatshirt identical to one Malik owned. "That pilot's actions are disgraceful," said the father. "I saw him scanning everyone else without any trouble." One of the young women nodded anger in her voice. "Yeah, he practically just waved me through. He didn't even look at my boarding pass that closely." The Morehouse alum touched Malik's shoulder lightly. "I hate that you're going through this. If there's anything I can do." Malik felt a surge of gratitude. Strangers united by common decency could be a powerful force. He gave them all a faint smile. "Thank you for your support," he said softly. "Let's see how this plays out." As the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, Connors returned. "Mr. Johnson," he said quietly, "the captain believes there's a discrepancy with your ticket, but the airline system shows you're fine. I've asked him to reconsider. It may be best if we speak with a supervisor to get this sorted quickly." Malik nodded. "Whatever it takes." Before they could call for a supervisor, Holloway reappeared, his expression one of barely contained frustration. He glanced at Connors, then addressed Malik for the first time, albeit grudgingly. "Let's go inside. We can talk in the jet bridge. I don't want to hold up the flight any longer than necessary." Connors gestured for Malik to follow, giving him a slight nod of reassurance. Tanya opened the gate door, and the three men stepped onto the short tunnel that connected to the plane. The air inside the jet bridge was cooler, tinged with the scent of industrial carpeting and faint jet fuel. It was also slightly more private, though some passengers who'd already boarded could be glimpsed through the aircraft door, craning their necks to see what was happening. Once inside, Holloway folded his arms. "I don't know what your deal is, Mr. Johnson, but my manifest is missing your name. Until I get that clarified, I'm not comfortable with you on my flight." Malik kept his tone calm but firm. "I showed you my valid boarding pass. The gate agent confirmed it. The system recognized it. It's not my responsibility to figure out your missing manifest issue. I served this country to protect everyone's right to travel freely, including my own." Connors interjected. "I ran a quick check, Captain. Mr. Johnson's ID and boarding pass are in order. There are no red flags on his record. If you have another reason to suspect him of wrongdoing, state it now." Holloway glanced at Connors, then at Malik, struggling to maintain the upper hand. "I want a confirmation from the ground supervisor," he said, finally pulling out his phone. Malik took a measured breath. "That's acceptable, but the way this has been handled so far is completely inappropriate." He saw Holloway's expression tighten, as though stung by the remark. But the captain didn't reply. Instead, he started making a call. The minutes stretched tension humming in the confined space. The whine of the plane's auxiliary power unit vibrated through the walls, intensifying the discomfort. Passengers inside the aircraft were peering out, and those in the gate area were still recording. The scene had become more than just a boarding delay. It was shaping up to be a viral confrontation, waiting for resolution. Within a few minutes, a new figure approached the jet bridge from the plane's interior. A petite woman with a professional demeanor and short-cropped hair. She wore a navy blazer bearing the Delta Airlines insignia. Her name tag read, Marissa Clark, Gate Operations Supervisor. Marissa didn't look pleased to be dragged into the matter. She was juggling multiple flight schedules, staff rotations, and now a potential PR crisis. "Captain Holloway," she said, voice crisp. "I was told you requested my presence. What's the issue?" Holloway tried to regain some measure of calm authority. "My passenger manifest isn't matching the gate agent's. This man," he gestured to Malik without looking at him, "claims to have a valid seat, but I'm not seeing it on my end." Marissa arched an eyebrow, pulling out her tablet. "Let me check." With a few taps, she accessed the flight's passenger list. After a moment, she nodded. "Passenger Malik Johnson, seat 12A, confirmed and ticketed. No issues with overbooking." Holloway frowned. "Well, I've got a discrepancy. Maybe an update from last night didn't push to my device, or maybe your device wasn't synced properly." "Captain," Marissa interjected, her tone a shade sharper than usual. "In any case, there's nothing to indicate Mr. Johnson shouldn't be on board. I apologize on behalf of Delta for the confusion." Malik dipped his head in polite acknowledgement. "Thank you, Ms. Clark." But Holloway's face remained rigid. He struggled to mask his frustration, yet it was painfully obvious that his argument had collapsed. Connors stepped in once more. "So I believe we're settled." "Captain." The pilot cleared his throat. It was a tense moment, as though he was searching for one last angle to justify his behavior. Finally, he forced out, "Yes, it appears so." He turned to Malik, eyes glinting with resentment. "You can board, sir." With the confrontation presumably resolved, Marissa offered Malik a polite smile. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Johnson. If there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable, please let me know." Malik managed a small smile. "I appreciate that. I just want to get to my seat." Connors gave a slight nod to Malik. "I'll be on board as well. I think we can all just go on with the flight now." Holloway spun on his heel and strode into the cockpit without another word. Connors followed Malik into the cabin. By now, nearly all passengers were seated hushed conversations, filling the plane with a subdued tension. Eyes tracked Malik as he walked down the aisle from first class toward main cabin. Some offered discreet nods of solidarity or encouraging smiles. Others simply looked on, curiosity burning in their gazes. At row 12, Malik found his seat, stuffed his carry-on into the overhead bin, and settled in. His heart was still pounding, adrenaline surging from the confrontation. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling and exhaling, to steady himself. Nearby, an elderly couple quietly murmured their outrage over the pilot's behavior, while across the aisle, a young man wearing headphones gave Malik a thumbs up. It felt reassuring to know people had witnessed the injustice and, for the most part, sided with him. Up in the cockpit, Captain Holloway was wrestling with his own frustration. His first officer, Danielle Reyes, noticed immediately. "Everything okay, Captain?" she asked. Holloway didn't meet her eyes. "Just a glitch in the manifest," he muttered. "All taken care of." But Danielle had heard about the commotion through the airline grapevine. Word travels fast among flight crew. She suspected it was something more than just a glitch. She'd known Holloway for 6 months, and had occasionally sensed subtle comments or attitudes toward certain passengers. Though he never openly admitted anything, Danielle's gut told her he held biases. She debated whether to confront him or let it go. After all, he was the captain, and she needed to maintain a professional relationship. Still, an uneasy weight settled in her chest. She busied herself with pre-flight checklists, going through them methodically. She could sense that the flight ahead was going to feel heavier than usual, as though tension clung to the very air in the cockpit. The boarding process had taken longer than expected. Once all were finally seated and the cabin crew prepared for pushback, the flight was already 15 minutes behind schedule. Flight attendants distributed quick apologies over the intercom, attributing the delay to a minor technical issue with the passenger manifest. Malik stared out the window as the plane taxied away from the gate. He wondered if the pilot's resentment would translate into any further complications. He also noticed that Air Marshal Connors had taken a seat not far away, though in the same row on the other side of the aisle, presumably to keep an eye on the cabin. The two men exchanged a brief look of mutual respect. Connors gave a small nod silently, acknowledging the tension they'd both witnessed. Once in the air, it took about 20 minutes for the fastened seatbelt sign to ding off. Flight attendants began the beverage service. Passengers reclined their seats, some reading or napping, others talking quietly. The memory of the boarding fiasco lingered like a faint echo, not entirely gone, but subdued by the hum of engines at 30,000 feet. From his seat, Malik looked around. Part of him wanted to simply tune out with music or a podcast, but the events of the morning weighed heavily on his mind. Instead, he opted to take a moment to ground himself. He pulled out his phone, swiped to airplane mode, and opened a note-taking app. Sometimes he found writing therapeutic, a way to process experiences both good and bad. He typed a few words. Today, I encountered a barrier I hoped was behind us, but I remember my father's words. Show dignity in the face of ignorance. That's what I did. I stood tall, refused to be disrespected. And in the end, the truth prevailed. He paused, reflecting before continuing. It's not about winning. It's about standing up for what's right and not letting someone else's narrow mind diminish my value. A soft beep from the intercom. The flight attendant's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some mild turbulence shortly, so please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The aircraft gently vibrated as it hit a pocket of unstable air. Malik looked out the window. The world below was a quilt of greenery and urban sprawl, wreathed by cotton-like clouds. It reminded him that whatever conflict was happening in this pressurized metal tube life on the ground continued unabated. Soon the flight attendants made their way down the aisle with a cart of drinks and snacks. A curly-haired attendant named Bella reached Malik's row. She offered him a gentle smile. "Sir, I'm sorry about what happened at the gate. Would you like a complimentary beverage or snack?" Malik appreciated the gesture, though he wondered if it was just the airline's attempt to cover up a potential PR nightmare. Still, kindness is kindness, and he was grateful. A ginger ale would be nice. "Thank you," he said. Across the aisle, Connors politely declined any drink, preferring to stay sharp. The seat next to Connors was empty, which gave him room to discreetly observe the cabin. As the plane journeyed north, Malik found his thoughts drifting to the deeper ramifications of what had just happened. It wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a reminder of how easily old wounds could be reopened. He wasn't naive. He knew racism still existed. However, witnessing it in such a public and humiliating way from someone with authority unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He glanced across the aisle at Connors, wondering about his background. Air Marshals often came from military or law enforcement. The fact that Connors had stepped in gave Malik a small sense of vindication. It took bravery to question the pilot's authority in a public setting, especially given the complexities of chain of command on an aircraft. Deep down, Malik suspected the pilot's animosity wouldn't vanish simply because the airline found his seat valid. He expected some sort of repercussion, maybe rudeness during landing or a harsh tone in announcements. But there was one thing he never expected, that before this plane touched down, Captain Holloway would face a karmic moment that would seal his fate. About halfway into the flight, Danielle Reyes, the first officer, made an announcement from the cockpit, as the captain had delegated the passenger interactions to her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have strong headwinds, so we're expecting a minor delay into JFK. We appreciate your patience." Headwinds turbulence, it was all part of flying. But behind the scenes, Danielle was acutely aware that the tension between Holloway and the rest of the crew was affecting the cockpit atmosphere. She'd caught him grumbling under his breath, occasionally punching the controls with more force than necessary. "Captain, everything okay?" she asked, her voice respectful but concerned. He merely grunted in response. "Just focus on your instruments, Reyes." She decided to let it go for now, though she knew this flight couldn't end soon enough. She also made a mental note if Holloway did anything unsafe or unprofessional, she'd be compelled to report it to airline management. Safety of flight was paramount, personal prejudice be damned. Meanwhile, in row 12, Malik decided to close his eyes for a bit. He leaned back, letting the hum of the engines lull him. But just as he was drifting into a light doze, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He opened his eyes to see a timid-looking man, maybe in his late 20s, peering over from row 11. "Sorry to bother you," the man whispered. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. I didn't speak up before, but I was right behind you when it happened. I recorded everything on my phone." Malik blinked in mild surprise. "Oh, thanks. You don't have to apologize for not speaking up. It's a tough situation." The man nodded, swallowing nervously. "Anyway, I didn't want to cause a scene, but if you need the footage, I'm willing to share it. My name is Aaron Davis. Here's my contact info." He handed Malik a small slip of paper. Malik felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. I'm Malik." The two exchanged a brief, heartfelt nod. So far, no one had asked for the footage, but in today's social media climate, having a record could be incredibly important. Unbeknownst to the passengers in main cabin, the pilot and first officer were receiving updates about weather conditions near New York. A sudden storm cell had formed, threatening to complicate the approach to JFK. Danielle made the announcement to the cabin with professional composure, but inside the cockpit, Holloway was even more stressed. His short temper flared as he muttered expletives under his breath. "Approach is telling us we may have to hold," Danielle said calmly. "Tell them we'll do one loop, but I'm not sitting in a pattern for half an hour." Holloway snapped. Danielle regarded him carefully. "Captain, we'll do whatever approach directs. Safety first." Her words only seemed to anger him more. "You think I need you telling me about safety?" She sighed, deciding not to argue. The pilot's job was to follow air traffic control's instructions. Yet the tension in the cockpit was building, and no one else in the cabin, besides the flight attendants who occasionally heard glimpses over the intercom, knew how fragile the pilot's mood was becoming. Roughly an hour from arrival, the plane hit moderate turbulence. The cabin lights flickered slightly. Seatbelt signs glowed once more, and the captain's clipped voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some rough air, so please remain seated. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately." Passengers dutifully complied, some tensing up. Malik felt the plane dip and sway, but he remained calm, trusting the aircraft's resilience. Through the window, dark clouds stretched across the horizon, foretelling a bumpy final leg. Then, out of nowhere, the overhead speakers crackled again, and Captain Holloway's voice snapped with unusual anger. "Whoever is recording or taking pictures in my cabin, I'm asking you to delete them. You do not have my permission to film me or my crew without authorization. This is a Federal Aviation Administration matter." A ripple of shock coursed through the cabin. People exchanged confused glances. FAA rules allowed crew to request that passengers not record certain operations or secure areas. But this was bizarre. Holloway was obviously worried about his earlier confrontation becoming public. Some quietly scoffed. Others surreptitiously continued to hold on to their phone videos, unwilling to be intimidated. Malik's phone buzzed with a text from Aaron, even though neither had signal. The message had been typed out beforehand and would send once they landed, presumably. But it read, "Got everything saved to the cloud. Don't worry." As the plane began its initial descent into New York airspace, the weather worsened. Lightning flashed in the distance. The engines roared louder to adjust to the storm's turbulence. In row 12, Malik gripped his armrest firmly, but remained outwardly calm. A flight attendant's voice cut through the overhead PA, instructing everyone to remain seated with belts fastened. In the cockpit, Danielle tried to maintain composure. The control tower requested they join a holding pattern due to inclement weather. Holloway cursed under his breath. "I can handle some crosswinds. We don't need this holding nonsense." Captain Danielle pleaded, "Just follow ATC. We have plenty of fuel. There's no reason to rush." Holloway's eyes flashed with irritation. "You don't question my judgment. I've been flying for over 20 years. Danielle stiffened, choosing not to escalate further. She complied, reading back instructions to the tower. The aircraft circled above the swirling clouds, buffeted by gusts of wind. Passengers felt it in the cabin, a sense of weightlessness, followed by sudden drops eliciting gasps or nervous laughter. Air Marshal Connors discreetly observed the pilot's announcements, the tension in the cabin, and the unsettled atmosphere. He sensed that Captain Holloway was not just professionally stressed, but personally agitated. While there wasn't much he could do about how the pilot flew the plane, pilots had ultimate authority. Connors silently resolved to keep an eye on any rash decisions. Then, without warning, the plane lurched, dropping rapidly for a few seconds. Several passengers cried out. Oxygen masks didn't deploy, indicating it wasn't that severe, but it was enough to rattle nerves. The flight attendants made urgent announcements about remaining seated. Holloway's voice came on again, sharp-edged. "Folks, we're navigating a weather system. This is your captain speaking. Stay calm, and we'll be on the ground shortly." He neglected to mention the holding pattern, as though determined to proceed with landing, despite air traffic's advisories. Danielle. Her voice lowered, tried to reason with him again. "Captain ATC says the storm overhead at JFK is intense. They're recommending we hold for 10 more minutes, or divert to Newark if conditions don't improve. Let's not take unnecessary risks." He exhaled, bristling. "Fine. 10 more minutes. But if they don't clear us, we're going in anyway. My call." In row 12. Malik kept his composure, though the plane's abrupt maneuvers were making his stomach churn. His mind drifted back to moments in Afghanistan, when a helicopter he was in had to make emergency evasive moves under enemy fire. It was a sobering parallel once again. He had no real control depending on the skill and judgment of someone else. Eventually, the flight began a bumpy approach, with the runway lights of JFK faintly visible through sheets of rain and swirling cloud. As they broke through the clouds, the plane rocked, engines throttling. Danielle skillfully guided the controls, and the wheels hit the runway with a jarring thud. A collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin as the plane slowed on the drenched tarmac. Upon reaching the gate at JFK, applause broke out among some passengers. The relief was palpable. Seatbelts were unclicked, overhead bins opened. People were eager to disembark to feel solid ground. Malik exhaled slowly, gathering his belongings. He too was glad to have arrived in one piece. As the passengers shuffled out, some shot knowing glances at Malik. A few murmured supportive words. "Take care, or sorry again about that." The sense of solidarity warmed him, even as he felt exhausted from the emotional toll. Just outside the aircraft door on the jet bridge stood Air Marshal Connors, arms folded. As Malik stepped through the door, Connors straightened and performed a crisp salute directed at Malik. The gesture caught Malik off guard. His breath caught in his throat. Normally, a salute is reserved for military personnel, among themselves or from lower rank to higher rank. Connors, aware of Malik's service background, evidently wanted to offer him respect and acknowledgement. "Welcome to New York staff." "Sergeant," Connors said quietly, using the rank he must have gleaned from Malik's records. "Thank you for your service. I'm sorry for what you went through today." Malik blinked, returning the salute with a slow, deliberate motion. It was a deeply moving moment, one that overshadowed the negativity that had transpired. A hush fell over the few passengers who witnessed it, and some even raised their phones to capture that poignant gesture. "Thank you, Malik," murmured his voice, thick with emotion. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Even as Malik began to walk away, a pair of uniformed airport security officers approached the aircraft door, accompanied by a Delta manager who had a stern expression on her face. She was holding a tablet in one hand, scanning a file. "Captain Richard Holloway," she said, addressing the pilot who had just emerged from the cockpit and stepped onto the jet bridge. Holloway nodded warily. "Yes, what is this?" The manager introduced herself as Patricia Reynolds, Director of Customer Experience for Delta at JFK. "Captain Holloway, we've received multiple complaints about your conduct before and during this flight. We also have video footage that suggests you may have violated company policies and possibly FAA regulations by threatening passengers who were recording in a public space." She handed the tablet to one of the security officers, who began reading aloud a complaint from a passenger referencing both the gate incident and the pilot's mid-flight announcement. Another officer held a phone displaying a video from social media. Holloway's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous. I was merely protecting the security of the flight," Patricia cut him off. "We take security very seriously, Captain, but your actions must align with FAA guidelines and Delta's code of conduct. Additionally, the passenger manifest error was confirmed to be an issue on your device, not a real threat. There is concern that your motive for denying boarding to Mr. Johnson may have been discriminatory." The last word hung in the air, heavy as lead. Holloway's mouth worked soundlessly, trying to form a rebuttal, but nothing came out. He cast a desperate glance around, but no one was coming to his defense. Captain Patricia continued with a crisp edge to her tone. "We're placing you on immediate administrative leave, pending an investigation. Please hand over your airline badge and secure any personal items from the cockpit. The security officers will escort you." Holloway blinked, stunned. "But I have a perfect record." "This is—" He couldn't seem to finish his sentence. Passengers filtering off the plane paused to watch many pulling out their phones again. Word spread quickly. The pilot who'd harassed a black passenger over a bogus manifest error was getting a swift, on-the-spot reprisal from his own company. Malik stood at the periphery, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. He never liked to see someone's career in jeopardy, but the pilot had brought it upon himself. It was a hard and very public karma. While Holloway was escorted away, still sputtering protests, Patricia turned to Malik. "Mr. Johnson," she offered her hand. "On behalf of Delta, I'd like to formally apologize. We're extremely grateful for your patience and professionalism. If you have time, we'd like to discuss the matter further in our office." Malik shook her hand, still processing the sudden turn of events. "I appreciate the apology. I'm just trying to get home. But I understand if you need a statement." Patricia nodded. "We'll contact you. For now, please know we're offering a full refund for this flight, plus additional compensation for the distress. Thank you for your service to our country, and for flying with Delta." In that moment, Malik felt a wave of validation. The day had started with a humiliating confrontation, but it ended with the airline taking decisive action. The memory of being publicly singled out, doubted, and demeaned wouldn't vanish overnight, but at least he had the satisfaction of knowing that justice, however swift and surprising, had been served. Once through the terminal, Malik paused to collect himself. He dialed his wife, Angela, who was waiting at home in Harlem. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, babe, you land safely?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Yeah, I did," Malik replied softly. "It was a rough flight, though. I'll explain everything when I get home." He didn't mention the details yet. Part of him wanted to unload the entire story, but he preferred to do it face to face. As he walked through the bustling terminal, he noticed some of the passengers from his flight waving at him. A few gave him supportive words. It was a strange experience, feeling like a minor celebrity for all the wrong reasons. He headed toward baggage claim, where the storm outside was still pounding rain against the airport roof. In that dreary, rainy afternoon, a sense of calm washed over Malik. He was free of the plane, free of confrontation. He'd stood up for himself with dignity, and the truth had prevailed. Malik retrieved his bag and stepped outside to hail a taxi. The city air smelled of wet pavement and diesel fumes. Horns blared incessantly, typical New York. As he waited by the curb, droplets of rainwater soaking into his jacket, he reflected on everything that had happened. The pilot who tried to keep him off the plane, citing a bogus overbooking. The gate agent who attempted to help, trembling with nerves. The Air Marshal who had stepped in decisively not only to defuse the situation, but to offer Malik a salute of genuine respect. The fellow passenger who recorded everything and pledged to share the footage. Finally, the airline's swift and public rebuke of the pilot's behavior. Yes, it had been emotionally draining. But somewhere in the midst of that turbulence, both literal and metaphorical, Malik found hope. Hope that people could come together to stand against prejudice, that truth could overshadow hateful ignorance, and that sometimes karma delivered its lessons more swiftly than one would expect. He thought of the pilot now facing an investigation, and the very real possibility of losing his job or facing severe disciplinary action. Malik felt no joy in that man's misfortune, only a sober reminder that actions have consequences. Malik arrived home that evening, greeted by his wife's warm embrace and the laughter of his 2 children, who ran to him with open arms. The warmth of family reminded him that no matter what darkness he'd faced that day, he still had a bright sanctuary to return to. They sat down at the kitchen table, and Malik recounted the entire ordeal. Angela's eyes widened, sometimes filling with tears of anger. Their children, though young, sensed the gravity in their father's voice. When he described the Air Marshal's salute and the pilot's swift comeuppance, Angela's tension seemed to lift, replaced by relief that her husband was safe and vindicated. Later that night, as rain continued to pelt the windows, Malik stared out into the city lights, reflecting on the day. He knew there would be follow-up calls from the airline, possibly from news outlets, if the story went viral. But for now he felt a quiet peace. He had faced an injustice head-on, with dignity, and had emerged stronger. The salute from the Air Marshal echoed in his mind, a powerful affirmation that respect can transcend prejudice. A corner of his phone buzzed with notifications. Social media had already started to pick up the story. He glimpsed a headline: "Pilot refuses to acknowledge black man's ticket." Seconds later, the Air Marshal salutes him. The story was out traveling at digital speed, and maybe, just maybe, it would make a few people think twice before letting their biases turn into harmful action. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one man's battle against discrimination at 30,000 feet. Sometimes real heroes aren't wearing capes. They're wearing quiet dignity and an unwavering sense of right and wrong. Whether it's a federal air marshal risking his anonymity to speak up, or a gate agent trying to do the right thing, we see that integrity and courage can shine even in the darkest moments. If this story moved you, if it fired up your sense of justice, then please take a moment right now, share and subscribe to this channel. Spread the word, because when we amplify voices of fairness and unity, we help push back the walls of prejudice and hatred. Together, let's keep these conversations alive, challenge injustice wherever it appears, and inspire more moments where human decency wins the day. Your support means everything.